Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's FPC Radio Live, and it's John. It's Tom Brady's birthday. Happy birthday, Tom. I know you're listening right now. I'm sure you've gotten all my letters. There's been dozens this week alone. But I'm sure he's listening right now. Looking at the viewer count. It doesn't say specifically, Tom, but I know. I just know. Something in my gut tells me, John, Tom is listening. So here's your chance, John. Tell him anything you want to tell him.
Happy birthday, Tom. And once again, you're raining on Aaron Rodgers' parade because although he's not playing tonight, he's making his Jets debut, which is kind of an oxymoronic statement. But we're going to see a lot of Aaron Rodgers tonight. How many times will they show him on the sideline, talking to teammates, coaches, whatever? I'm going to say the over-and-under is like 16 and a half. But happy birthday to Tom. He's now 46, which still makes him 14 years younger than me.
Yeah, that's true. And technically right now, I guess 10 years numerically older than me. I mean, technically it's more like 9. You know, I'll be 37 soon. So, you know, it's not quite 10 years, but you know, we're close-ish. He's done a little bit more than I have, though. He's made a little bit more money. Became another minority owner of a professional franchise. This time in soccer. Oh, I'm sorry, football. Yeah, I mean, clearly we're starting to see his post football career plan, and that is, well, he's going to dabble in sports ownership. He's going to sit back. He's kind of going to be like Magic Johnson, really.
Yeah, I mean, he could go down that path. Obviously, Magic got invested with Starbucks and TGIF and the Magic Johnson theaters and some real estate. So he had a really wide-ranging portfolio.
Well, I mean, you have TB12, Under Armour, Brady brand. Now, again, I mean, maybe some of these brands aren't as strong, but
so well.
Yeah, well,
right.
I mean,
but
Under
again,
Armour. I mean, he was, if I remember correctly, he got stock very early on, in the beginning of the company. So, and at this point, by my count, this is what, 3 professional franchises he now has a piece of the pie in.
Yeah, the Raiders, the Aces, and the soccer club. So yeah, he's got a little bit invested.
And still no Dolphins. Still no Dolphins. After all that hoopla.
Well, you know what was interesting is, if I remember, before John Henry bought the Red Sox, he was, I don't know if he was a majority owner of the Marlins, but he also had a stake in the Yankees, which I think is kind of weird if you get the same owner involved in 2 different franchises. I mean, that does seem to be a conflict of interest, and he had to sell those before he bought the Red Sox. I'm sure there's a lot of Red Sox fans would like to see him sell the Red Sox today.
Well, I was going to say not a conflict of John Henry's interest, because his interest is money. So I don't think he sees any conflict there, you know. So, but yeah, it's look, I mean, I'm still, I don't know quite what stage of grief I'm in right now in terms of Tom Brady not playing this season. I think I'm past the denial phase, although I still have my moments where I'm like, no, there's still time. There's still time, John. You know, maybe I'll get reinvigorated later in the season. Maybe a key injury happens. I'm not rooting for it. Certainly no way I would ever root for it. But we know injuries happen. What if a quarterback of a contender goes down for a significant amount of time? Oh, maybe they call Tom, John. Maybe. That's what I'm hoping. Because I want to hear the phrase, 46-year-old Tom Brady hits the field.
Yeah, it could happen, right? But it's really difficult in that sport. I mean, you can see that with like a pitcher. You know, pitcher announces his retirement. Remember, Clemens retared, and then he came back, and Susan Waldman went up in the booth. And a pitcher can kind of do that.
George Steinbrenner's booth.
yeah. She was flipping out. I had her on one time when I was doing sports at 15:10. She was wonderful. She was great. I mean, she was such a character. I mean, she played along and was fantastic as a guest. But yeah, I mean, it'd be tough to do that as a quarterback, like, you know, step in, take over. Now you've got to build that chemistry with wide receivers, offensive line, the coaching staff, and everything else. I mean, I think it could be done easier in other sports. But I think you'll probably miss it most as you come down the home stretch and you get to the postseason. And he's always in the postseason, even with a team with a losing record last year. He made the postseason. I think that's where you're going to miss him when Tom Brady's not playing on divisional weekend or, you know, obviously Super Bowl weekend where he showed up 10 times as a player.
Man, I got to start talking to to Rodgers fans and ask them how they deal with knowing that there's going to be no Super Bowl every year. I just don't get it.
Ooh, that's rough.
Yeah,
That's rough.
well, it's true though. 13 years now.
I can't really fight you on that.
I mean, I'm just saying. I'm trying. Look, I'm trying to do a service here. I'm trying to do a positive service for Jets fans here. I'm trying to temper expectations. So if I'm wrong, it's going to be even better. But if I'm right, and I likely am, they'll be like, okay, you know what? I think we should have expected this by now. Okay, it's going to have a nice season.
To pick a team not to win a Super Bowl is a lot easier than to pick them to win it.
Well, no, I mean, right? Yes, but understood that the acquisition of Aaron Rodgers, I think most Jets fans are thinking Super Bowl, right? That's reasonable.
Well, they have to because they haven't had a quarterback in the caliber.
They have to, but I'm just saying, you may have to expect that, but don't get too excited. I'm just saying, just expect the worst. Odds, just the odds, John.
You telling fans not to get excited?
Well, I'm telling them to get excited, but I'm saying prepare yourself mentally. I'm just trying. I'm looking out for their well-being because I don't want to get them too high, and then the fall makes it even worse. You get really high, you get knocked out in the divisional round, or you get to the conference championship and Aaron Rodgers throws 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions and whatever, and they have 5 extra possessions and they do nothing with it. I don't know, John. I'm just saying. Sorry, I'm really
talking about this, Brady. Will you? We're gonna push forward.
But this is the whole
show in a row. I think someone's eating your oatmeal this morning because you've got another thing about Aaron Rodgers today, and the poor guy isn't even going to play tonight.
Well, hey, he's trying to hold off that. Look, I don't blame him. It's the Hall of Fame game. He's going to get in. Maybe. Well, again, they're going to have 4 preseason games, so maybe he will get in the quote unquote third, i.e., the second week of the preseason.
I can't remember the last time he played in a preseason game. I don't think it's got to be years now. He's not one of those guys that plays in the preseason.
No, but I think he'll take a series or two. I mean, we're talking like he might throw a couple out to the flat. You know what I mean? Or like they'll have like one play where they'll send like Alan Lazard or whoever deep, and the fans will cheer. It'll probably be incomplete because it's the preseason and no one really cares. But that'll be it. That's what I expect. I mean, you might get like 2 series. And I guess it depends on his motivation and how Robert Saleh approaches it. But, I would think at least in one of these games, he'll at least get maybe a half. Excuse me, just because, well...
I doubt it.
Really?
Doubt it.
Really?
I really do. Yeah, I think he'll have 1 or 2 series max. It'll be kind of ceremonial.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing. That's the approach... And this is kind of getting back to my first point, and not so much in a joking matter. Obviously, I was kind of being a little, kidding around. Not so much. I mean, there was a lot of truth to what I was saying, but the point is, I think taking it for, and just saying, oh yeah, it's going to be fine. I honestly, if I'm a Jets fan, and just from the, if you're Aaron Rodgers, I want to get at least a good solid half of. I understand that like training camp practices are obviously far more intricate and obviously you're doing a lot of football things, but I think there's a lot of value in at least getting, especially with a new team with a lot of pressure on you, getting a solid half of football against, well, majority starters, but for the most part, a pretty soft defense. And I think that would be a great way for the Jets to kind of find an early groove. A series or 2 is not going to do it, especially, like I said, if it's ceremonial. Like I said, you're going to see a couple tosses to the flat, probably a handoff or 2, and that's going to be it, and you're not going to do anything from that.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that point, obviously, because he's been a little bit different with the Jets than he was, especially late in his career with the Packers, reworking the contract and really being, quote-unquote, all in. So being all in would be, I'm going to play the first half of the third preseason game.
And one of the perceived issues that he has had in the past is getting on the same page with some of his young receivers. So, or new receivers. Maybe, in this case, we'll call him new because, well, there are some new receivers, but he did kind of bring some of the Packers with him. So there is some familiarity there. But for the most part, like it's new. And like, that's something that, whether it's true or not, I mean, that was for lack of a better word, an excuse for certain shortcomings. Was, oh well, it took them a while to get on the same page, so that's why I'm saying if you're Aaron Rodgers, you probably want to play at least a half, at least get some semblance of as close as you can to real football against an opponent. Do we know? I should know this, but do they do joint practices? I would imagine they'd have to at least once because they're on Hard Knocks, and I think that adds value to it.
Yeah, they'll have a joint practice with someone. All the teams. That's really what they're doing more and more of. I think the Patriots have 2 of them. That's where you really get a lot of not intel on the other team, but at least you can see how your team measures up against other teams. And to your point, Rodgers wasn't even showing up at OTAs and minicamp in Green Bay. I think he was showing up at minicamp, not OTAs, and he was just kind of going through the motions where he's been a little bit different again, all in terms of, moving to New York, staying there, working with his receivers. So I think his buy-in was a lot better than it was the last few years in Green Bay, which again is going to infuriate Packers fans. I mean, they had to probably ready to explode. The guy reworked his contract. He's talking about being a leader. He's, embracing his young receivers. And a lot of that last year with the problems with the young receivers has to be on Aaron Rodgers as well. You're the future Hall of Fame quarterback. You've won 4 MVPs. You've got to be the leader. You can't look for the wide receivers to know what the hell they're doing in their rookie year. Now, his first pass of last year was a dime that Cookie Watson dropped. My very first pass of the season was a beautiful pass to an open wide receiver that the kid dropped. And I think that just set the tone for the entire season, which you can't have happen. Like, Tom Brady would never let that happen, right? I mean, heck, the guy was down 28-3 in the Super Bowl. I will guarantee Aaron Rodgers probably just put the goggles and flippers up in that situation where Tom Brady just said, well, 28-3, no big deal.
Think about the, excuse me. Think about the, at the time, the 50th touchdown pass. The play before it was the same exact play. That it was a pass that was incomplete. I can't remember the specifics. I think it wasn't quite on target, but I think Randy Moss had his hands close, if I recall. I'm kind of, maybe it's early in the morning. I can't go. But anyways, the point is, right.
16 years ago, too. We're all getting old.
Yeah. Oh, God, 16 years ago. My goodness.
Is that crazy?
That game is old enough to drive.
You can drink legally, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I had just no, I could. Yeah, no, I was 21. I was 21 by then.
Okay, that's right. Yeah, December was
December 27. Yeah, and I was October 2007. So I had just turned. Actually, I had turned
rolling by then.
I had turned 21, and I think it was like 2.5 weeks later. I flew out to Indianapolis to go to that game, the Patriots and Colts game. So. It was a nice, it was good. It was a good first time drinking. In the airport, it was a cool experience.
They were both undefeated at that point.
Yeah,
if I remember, the Patriots were trailing in that game by.
They were down by 10 late in the game because I remember I was in a section literally filled with Colts fans. There was not another Patriots fan in sight. Even the person I went with wasn't a Patriots fan. And
you see Irsay trying to save an orca whale at that point. Years ago,
no, I think, but to the funny thing is that was the infamous piped in crowd noise game that everyone got their got all up in arms about or whatever. I mean, look, I was in the stadium. There's no way I'm going to hear any difference because it was loud regardless. But
you're 21 and you're already inebriated.
Yeah, well, look, I'm not the type of person who needs to get blacked out. I want to remember these things, and generally, I've said it before, don't invite me to a Super Bowl party because I just don't want to come. I just want to watch the game. I don't want to chat. I don't want to know about your life. I don't care. I'm sorry, it might sound harsh, but I figure, I break it to you, now, and that way you don't bother with the niceties later. But anyways, some fan was talking trash to me, and I remember there was the first score in the comeback. Obviously, it didn't tie the game or put him ahead. Was a a touchdown pass in the back corner of the end zone to Randy Moss, and it was in the same end zone that I was sitting. I was in the balcony, but it was in the same corner that I was sitting. And I remember turning around to the guy as the drive started. I was just like, talk to me in a couple minutes when Randy Moss catches a touchdown in this corner. And a couple minutes later, it happened. I turned around. The guy's like white as a sheet. Now, okay. I think I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you could see a very...
It's in Indianapolis in the fall.
So yeah, he was...
as white as a sheet at that point.
He saw that. He saw that. And he was just like, oh, bleep. Because, very next drive, the Patriots get it. I believe... I think it was Kevin Falk scored the go-ahead touchdown. I'm again my
that sounds right.
Yeah, because I believe it was a rushing touchdown. So again, my memory's a little shaky, but I'm impressed. 16 years later, it's still there. But anyways, it was very good because they played.
If it only been live betting at that point, you would have made some money.
Oh my God, I would have. No, actually, I would have probably cursed the Patriots. Actually, that's how it would have probably went. But that year though, again, whenever when I talk about like greatest teams ever, certainly that never won a Super Bowl, you're going to be hard pressed to find a team that you're going to put higher on the list than the 2007 Patriots, because we talk about the Colts, but that was the third team I think that they faced, that they played the Cowboys, who were 6-0 at the time, and I believe they played another team both at 7-0. So they had three, because there was a large number of undefeated teams late in that season. Certainly what we're used to, because like lately I feel like we're done with the undefeateds, or at least there's only one left throughout the season, and then we had, I think, multiple teams at 7-0 at one point. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So there were 3 games during that stretch where the Patriots went head to head with undefeated teams, and obviously they won all of them. Dallas was the other, and I'll have to go back. It's been a while, but
it might have been the Chargers.
Yeah. You know what? That's what I was. Yeah, that was the team that kind of.
Chargers were really good that year. They made it to the AFC Championship.
Yeah.
The thing that still burns in my brain that year is how they struggled down the stretch. I remember they were like a 24-point favorite on a Sunday night game against the Eagles, and they barely beat the Eagles. I mean, remember, they were flexing the Patriots into like every Sunday night game at Buffalo, at home against Philadelphia. It was just like they were redoing the schedule because obviously this region was rooting for the Patriots to go undefeated. And by then, you probably, the rest of the nation probably hated the Patriots at that point more than ever.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, sure.
I mean, it continued to grow with 3 more Super Bowls, but 07, because they were just destroying.
Well, you think about it. After week 1, you see, I mean, just right off the bat, like you're thinking, like all the talk going into that season was like Randy Moss. Is he still elite? Is he this? What's going to happen? Is it going to work? Is he this, that, and the other? And all this talk, mystery, everything, and they go out and play the Jets. And that first touchdown pass, you're like, oh my God. Because I think anyone who actually watched the Patriots and watched Tom Brady week in and week out knew that this guy was an elite quarterback. Unfortunately, people needed apparently to see 2007, despite the 3 Super Bowls and all the other great things that he had done to that point. They needed to see 2007 to actually believe it. But you go back to that very first game, and I know they've talked about this after. That was no set play. That was just Randy. Go outrun 3 Jets defenders, and I'm just going to launch the ball. I don't know, what was it, 60 yards in the air in a dime? And you see, and you see that, and you're just like, okay, they are clearly. But the big point here, though, is, John, and this is kind of what happened towards the end of the season. Obviously, the pressure of going undefeated, I think, ultimately started to. I mean, they embraced it, sure, and I think they handled it well enough. But there's still pressure, and you still have to handle that week in and week out. That need to be perfect at every point. And also, towards the end of the season, they became a lot more one-dimensional. They didn't have a great running back, John. I mean, it was Lawrence Maroney. They didn't have a great running game. They just their running game was efficient at picking up small yards and certainly closing out drives when they needed it. When Tom, because this is the thing, Tom wasn't throwing a bunch of short touchdown passes. This wasn't like, oh, we're trying to milk as many points. Like, they certainly ran up the score, but I'm talking like there's also moments where you can sit there and be like, well, he also threw 6 touchdowns against Miami and then sat for a quarter and a half. So, you know what I mean? They weren't like trying to rack it. Like, they gave it the ball to the running back, and I think that gave the perception that they were, a really good running team when they weren't. It was literally 75% Tom Brady and Randy Moss. And I'm not saying this to disrespect Wes Welker or anyone else, but as soon as teams like Baltimore, and certainly the Giants obviously did this through getting pressure up the middle, but as soon as they started to put more focus, and it's silly to say, but as soon as they started to put more like bracket coverage on Randy Moss and take away a lot of those extra things, then all of a sudden they became a little bit more one-dimensional. And we saw that obviously in the Super Bowl when they were forced to, well, they didn't really have time. Tom didn't have time because he was getting buried up the middle. And as soon as that happens, all of a sudden that offense isn't as potent, and it evens the playing field. Because like earlier in the season, teams just could not stop it. And, it looked like they were going to run through it. I mean, Tom, that offense could have probably scored 700 points that season, like if they wanted to.
Oh yeah, they were putting up 50 pretty much effortlessly against some pretty decent defenses. And when you got to the Super Bowl, the issue obviously, I think the offensive line was banged up. He was banged up with that left foot injury, whatever it was. He was wearing a walking boot after the AFC Championship game or after the win against Jacksonville. I can't remember which one of those games it was. But also, even think back, Jacksonville played them pretty competitively. I think that was, 31-20? And I think Jacksonville actually scored first in that game. And then it was 21-12 over the Chargers in the AFC Championship game. And
but wasn't
in that game?
Wasn't Brady literally perfect against Jacksonville though?
Oh, against Jacksonville, he was phenomenal. Yeah,
I think he threw 2 incompletions.
Yeah.
And one was a throwaway.
Yeah, the 2 best performances I've seen by a quarterback, and I'll tie in Brady and Rodgers here. Brady against Jacksonville in the divisional round in 2007, and Rodgers against the Falcons in the divisional round in 2010. They were playing at a completely different level than they've even ever played at. But yeah, the 21-12 win over the Chargers in the AFC Championship game, that was 14-12 late in the game. And remember, the Chargers were in the red zone 4 times and had to settle for field goals, and they didn't have LaDainian Tomlinson. And Philip Rivers was playing on a busted knee. That was a rough game. And the Giants were just a bad matchup. They just were. I mean, they played them tough in the regular season. They had that great pass rush. The offensive line was banged up. And the pressure was just immense. I mean, the Warriors.
And despite all that, despite all that, 90 seconds to go, the Patriots are up.
The lead. Even in the 3 Super Bowl losses, he's given them the lead late in the fourth quarter. I think Bill Belichick's a great coach. I'm not that idiotic to go there. But let's not forget, I believe in the first 6 Super Bowls, the first 3 they won, the first 5 Super Bowls, the 3 wins and the 2 losses against the Giants, the Patriots gave up 62 points in the fourth quarter in those games.
Yeah.
And Brady bailed them out in every situation, right? I think the Rams scored 14 points in the fourth quarter to tie. But remember, Carolina scored 19 points in the fourth quarter.
Oh yeah, I mean they took the lead. Yeah. I think there was 4 lead changes in the fourth quarter alone.
That was an incredible game.
Yeah. Oh, it was. Super
Bowls ever.
And again, I mean, this is kind of going back to what I said just a few minutes ago, and it's it's incredible to me that people had to see 2007 to think that Tom Brady wasn't was an elite quarterback. You watch that second Super Bowl, and just again, back and forth. You need to play every single time, and it's okay, how is this guy not talked about as one? And then again, you look at the collection of if you want to dive deep, you talk about the collection of stats between those years from 01 to 05. He was top 3 in touchdown passes, top 5 in yards. Like, I mean, this guy was an elite quarterback, but unfortunately, people needed 2007 to actually see it. And it's like, well, okay, it doesn't mean that's when he started to be elite, because that's what we hear now. It's like, oh, well, he didn't become elite until 2007. I'm like, no, that's wrong. It's very wrong.
Touchdown passes in 02.
Yeah.
The only time he's never made the playoffs.
Well, look, I mean,
touchdown pass.
It's a different era of football, and a lot of people think they understand it, but they don't act that way. They'll say, oh yeah, no, I get it, and then make a point that completely disregards the whole era thing. And it's like, okay, if I understand that, like, look, I don't fully grasp what the football in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, and even the 80s were, because, well, I was born in 1986, John. I'm not going to sit here and claim to have watched and experienced that, but like, you can still educate yourself and have an appreciation for how the game has changed, and not look at everything as so black and white, because unfortunately that's what we're getting into. And I mean, we see it obviously with and Brady's so unique because his career is so long, and it happens to have, I don't know if this is true. I get my gut feeling is that the game of football has changed more in different ways over the last 20 years than it had before. Obviously, you go back to 1978 and some of the huge changes that led to free agency. There's nothing bigger than that. But the collection of changes, whether it's rules, whether it's how the game is covered and how it exploded over the last, you know what I'm saying? Like, does that make sense? Like, I don't think the game has changed.
Oh yeah, it's by far the biggest sport in the country.
And
I mean,
and a lot of that
schedule release outdraws NBA playoff games.
Well,
I mean,
but a lot of this also impacts the actual game on the field, because, like, well, it's more open offensively. It's safer, so the product can be marketed to a broader audience without many repercussions. That's why we have a Nickelodeon game. You know what I mean? If the NFL, and you think if concussions were an issue, the NFL didn't do any, and again, I use this term loosely, but if the NFL wasn't doing anything about concussions, quote unquote, do you think Nickelodeon would have them on their network? Now, again, I mean, I don't necessarily think everything's being done for concussions and the safety and all that stuff, but it's a lot different than what it was 20 years ago. And I think, again, the ripple effect being, well, to get to that, you have to change the rules. And a lot of these rules open up the game for the offenses, especially. And again, when you sit there and try to compare players from, I think the 20s, the early 2000s are a lot closer to the early 80s than they are to what we see now. Is that accurate?
Yeah. I mean, Brady led the league in touchdown passes with 28.
Yeah.
Which now I believe there were 5 or 6 quarterbacks with over 30 last year. That was actually a down year for touchdown passes. If Brady and Rodgers didn't reach 30, they generally hit that like by Thanksgiving or early December.
Well,
I think a lot of it.
I was going to say I'll let. Lot of it. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, I think a lot of it, and Clock Judge could speak to this much more than I can. But 1977 was the season in which I always remember this. I was 14 at the time, so I was a huge sports fan. The Atlanta Falcons that year gave up an average of 9.9 points per game.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, people talk about like the '85 Bears and the 2000 Ravens and the 2002 Buccaneers. Great defenses. The Falcons gave up 9.9 points per game. It wasn't a great defense. The point was the rules were so favored towards the defense. They ended up 7-7, giving up 9.9 points per game because you could maul wide receivers. Offensive linemen couldn't extend their arms. At that point, the league said, we've got to get more scoring involved here. And in 78, now you allowed receivers to go out on their patterns without getting mauled. Offensive linemen could extend their arms to pass protect. And then, you get a lot of great minds in the sport like Don Coryell and then let the Dan Fouts setting records, and then it took off from there. But you're right. Early 2000s, I would say the sport was closer to what it was 20 years before than now. I mean, now it's just like I love when people will say, "Oh, Kirk Cousins is a great quarterback. His passer rating far superior to Joe Montana's." I'm like,
yeah, exactly.
like, it is. But can we go a little deeper than that? I mean, it's a completely different sport than it was, when Montana was playing, certainly back in the 80s and early 90s.
Well, and again, that's why I say it's so fascinating because Brady's career just kind of spans very nicely that stretch and that change, where it's like he has a significant portion of his successful career played in an era that is vastly different than what it is now, and which again has caused a whole mess of. That's why his career passer rating isn't way up there because, well, guess what? The average passer rating, I believe, in 1999, obviously he was drafted in 2000, was 76, John. You know what it was in 2018? 97. And I hate passer rating, but that's a very simple and easy way to kind of show how a very simplistic measurement of quarterback play and offensive play, I guess you can say, has changed and certainly exploded over just essentially a 19, 20-year period.
Yeah, it's a 20% increase, right? So you look at what the guy accomplished, and Nick Wright, among Brady,
some of my favorite persons in the world, people in the world.
Yeah, but here's what he said about Tom Brady after Brady won his 7th Super Bowl. He goes, the guy's had 3 Hall of Fame careers. His first third, he was Troy Aikman. Great quarterback, great team, great defense, won 3 Super Bowls just like Troy Aikman. His middle third of his career was pretty much Dan Marino. Didn't win any Super Bowls during that stretch. Went to 2 of them, won a couple MVPs, started to put up ridiculous numbers. His final third of his career, he was Joe Montana, winning 4 Super Bowls and being a great quarterback all the while and just elevating teams, right? So if you can play for 22 years and be 1/3 Troy Aikman, 1/3 Dan Marino, and 1/3 Joe Montana, in totality, this isn't like just stretches. That's just amazing. Like, there aren't many players in the history of any sport that have had 3 Hall of Fame careers, right? I mean, they've played that long enough.
I'll be interested to see him eventually contradict himself on this, because it's going to happen. Because here's the thing: he's eventually going to have to argue against this argument, because I'd say that's a very strong argument for the greatest of all time. Am I correct? that's a pretty damning. I mean, you got your hand caught in the cookie jar type of, like, you got picked out of a lineup unequivocally. That's how strong that argument is for Tom Brady. So I'm going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see when he starts to walk back on that, because it's going to happen, because it's Nick Wright. So I don't want to give him too much credit.
Well, I was impressed with that.
I was, gotta, broken clocks right twice a day, right? Unless you mess around with the hand.
That's one of my things.
Yeah. Well,
that's one of my things. But you look at that. I mean, forget football. Let's just talk other sports. Like, Jordan. Again, he won 6 titles in an 8-year stretch. So this would be like if Jordan went to the Wizards and all of a sudden won a title.
Right.
He didn't make the playoffs in the 2 years there. And I get basketball and being a quarterback in football are different. You could play longer now at quarterback, although not many have, but you can play longer because, you're more protected than you were, say, back in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. I get that. But, like, how many guys have had that level of perfection for that long a period of time and won in all these different eras? It's just, it's unsurpassed. He's right in the debate with, Jordan, LeBron, pick your baseball players, pick your hockey players. And, he and Jim Brown to me are the 2 representatives from football that are in the discussion of the all-time greatest in terms of team sports. And Lionel Messi.
Yeah, who scored another 2 goals yesterday in very rainy Miami.
I know that this will make it more difficult for him. Like, him playing MLS would be like Brady going to, like, the Boston Crack League and playing football, or LeBron going to China and play, or Barry Bonds playing in the slow pitch softball league. It's stark how, look, the guy, I know soccer people that think he's the greatest player ever.
Yeah.
Like, they don't even want to debate it, that he surpassed everybody. To put him in MLS, which is a nice product, it really is, but it's not at the level of, La Liga or Serie A or the Bundesliga or the English Premier League. It is kind of unfair. The guy could score at will, which is nearly impossible to do on a soccer pitch.
Yeah, except he just
terminology correctly.
Yeah, no, it's good. Actually, you're good. We'll see. I'm a big lifelong Birmingham fan. Because Tom Brady's now the owner. So clearly, I got to bone up on my. Yeah. So I gotta get on my. I gotta get learning. I tweeted that photo of George in the back of the coffee shop when he was reading all those books and discovered Absolute Zero, all that stuff. That was me studying up on my soccer lingo. Sorry, football lingo.
He learned Portuguese, right?
Yes, Portuguese. He just picked it up. He picked it up because his cleaner was Portuguese.
Yes, and he's showing Derek Jeter and Bernie Williams how to get better.
Yeah, that's going to be me in a couple months and inside the locker room at a soccer game. They're just like, okay, the trajectory of your leg. But
exactly.
Anyway, so Hall of Fame game tonight. Obviously, it would be nice to get a little bit of a taste of some football. We'll talk about it tomorrow, but this is just a nice sign that we're getting closer and closer. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We're going to say one more time, happy birthday, Tom Brady, because I know you listen to every second of the show. And until you tell me otherwise, I'm just going to believe it. And so anyways, but yes, thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We're going to be back tomorrow to wrap up the week and, of course, talk about anything interesting that may have happened in the Hall of Fame game tonight. So thank you, everyone, and we will